Dear ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and a great pleasure to welcome our dear fellow scholar, Assistant Professor Kshitij Naikade from the Symbiosis Law School in Pune, who has been an assistant professor there for a considerable wealth of already 4.5 years. Professor Naikade has his main scientific interests in various areas of the law, among others international relations, issues in world politics, matters of India's foreign policy, matters of, to name only a few, public administration and management. And he has already published a considerable wealth of highly respectable papers, has participated in also a considerable wealth of seminars and conferences. And he has also participated in, again, a considerable and respectable wealth of projects, among which I'd like to point out especially a research project on water conservation law and effective policy implementation with special reference to a certain river, to the Mula Muta River, nearby Pune, the place of his alma mater, of course. He is following a great tradition of scholars of the Symbiosis Law School, which is a very dear partner of the Alps Network, in participating in this series. Therefore, he's following a great tradition. And in order to not take too much of his valuable time, of the time of his valuable presentation, I'd like to point out that today's topic is a topic which he has dealt with already very thoroughly, matters of politics of microfinance in India, and he will deal with reflections in regard to that from across the globe. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, with no further ado, please enjoy Professor Naikade.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the warm introduction, sir. It's a pleasure to address the gathering here of researchers. They must be your students, they must be from across the globe. And I hope to ensure that the presentation that I have for the next 1 hour is of an interest to you. Because the topic of microfinance sometimes feels very distant. It feels as if it's not something that concerns my own life. But the kind of ramifications of the idea of microfinance is something that is necessary for every continent as we speak today. And that is the reason why I would, in my short time, would like to just touch upon some of the basic tenets of microfinance and update you about why this has been considered as one of the biggest things to look forward to in the 21st century, right from the European Parliament to even the British Parliament and so many other first world, even United States of America, are looking at rebranded models of microfinance to ensure there is equitable distribution of resources. And I will be discussing those things. But thank you very much for the warm introduction. First up, just to give you a brief context for everyone, I teach at a law school. I'm an assistant professor at a law school. My basic education is in political science, international relations, and world politics. And my PhD topic is in economics. So I am a kind of mixture of all these interdisciplinary subjects that we have. And therefore, I kind of bring together vantage points from multiple streams of academia. And that's the reason why this topic of, or this theme of microfinance really interested me. I would not be taking a lot of your time because I realize the attention span of people is kind of very limited these days. So in a short span of time, I will try to give you the larger ideas of microfinance. And I hope there are some questions from you and you people are curious enough to kind of know things from my end and try to understand India. On that note, before I begin, I would also like to strongly invite everybody here to India at some point of time to visit my beautiful country. And the reason why I kind of mentioned this at the start of my presentation is because When we are looking at India as a country, we are not looking at a small piece of land somewhere with some distinctive features. We are looking at a huge landmass, having population which is only the second in the world after China, and very shortly we are going to overtake China as well as the most populous country in the world, with a diverse geography, cultural kind of dimensions, and the bandwidth of experiences that you will have in India are kind of second to none. And therefore, if anybody is interested in knowing more about socio-economic polity, knowing more about human civilizations, philosophy, and a lot of these other things, I think India is a very good place to kind of visit. And the reason why I say this is because when I travel across Europe, I was in France and Italy a few days back. There are a lot of preconceived notions and prejudices about India, and some of them find it a very exotic country. Some of them might have heard a lot of things about, some might have read about things in media, but I can assure you that my country can offer much more than what you might have been given through social media or through media. And I would strongly encourage people to visit India to know more about its rich heritage, culture. And if you're students of economics, politics, sociology, anthropology, and diverse streams of media studies, I think India is the best place to kind of visit first up. So this is some sort of a promotional, unpaid kind of an activity for India that I just want to kind of warmly invite you people. Moving on to my topic of presentation for the day, I am going to look at the politics of microfinance. Although the topic suggests the politics of microfinance in India, one must understand that the issues faced are very much similar to a diverse sections of countries. Majorly countries which got their independence post 1940s because of long-standing colonial struggle, anti-colonial struggle, are majorly 70 years down the line facing some of the similar problems. So my topic for presentation, or my area of research for my PhD, focuses on the idea of microfinance and its relevance per se. Now, when I discuss about this, I sometimes find people who may not have heard about the idea of microfinance in the first place. And therefore, first up, I would like to give you a basic idea of what microfinance is. Microfinance, for just from the word itself, kind of refers to a small kind of credit, small amount of money that is given to an individual for any entrepreneurial activity or for an income generation activity. uh, Now you may ask me that why is it separately called as microfinance, and why is it not called as a part of the conventional banking infrastructure where you need a loan, you go to a bank, and the bank gives you a certain amount of loan. The reason is that the conventional banking infrastructure or the conventional banking system works on the principle of collateral, or works on the principle of security. So you may be eligible to get a loan from a bank only if you have some amount of collateral to offer to the bank. Now, that's a fundamental flaw in the banking infrastructure across the globe. The reason is because the real people who need money, who are in need for some sort of finance to fund their operations, but may not have a certain amount of collateral to back them up, are completely excluded from the conventional banking system. Now, what about those people? How are we going to take care of such people? Who is going to fund these people? And it is at this particular instance the idea of microfinance comes into the picture. So microfinance allows funds to be given to those people who may not have a collateral, who may not have a huge amount of security to back them up. And that is the reason why microfinance is looked at as a solution to the long-standing problem of system-induced poverty. I'm not conventionally using the term poverty because poverty is a broad term and can include a lot of things. I am talking about system-induced poverty. System-induced poverty is basically where you have an idea, where you have the willpower to do something, but the system, but the institution, the government, the banking infrastructure kind of stops you from fulfilling your potential. So microfinance currently stands as one of the most viable alternatives to ensure that people come out of system induced poverty. And that is the reason why microfinance is looked at in a lot of countries as the, people call it as the magic pill, or they call it as one-stop solution, or they call it as something that can just change the fortunes of a country. Now, why is that the case? So why is microfinance kind of looked up as a solution to this concern or system-induced poverty? The reason is because in the 21st century, especially in a post-pandemic world or around the pandemic, we have seen the rise of this phenomenon called as income inequality. I hope some of you have heard of this term, income inequality. Income inequality or inequality is different from that of poverty. Poverty can still be calculated and addressed, and there can be various public policy interventions to eradicate poverty. But income inequality is a subjective term. Inequality is something that can have ramifications that go beyond poverty. Microfinance has the potential to ensure that people come out of income inequality as well. I mean, just to give you a brief an example of what income inequality is today. According to the World Inequality Report, which they come up with every year, uh, the top 1% individuals or the top 1 to 5% individuals in the world control resources that can easily feed and take care of the bottom 60% of the globe. Even in the United States of America, if you look at the combined wealth of Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Warren Buffett, the combined wealth of these three individuals is more than enough to pull out more than 50 to 60% of the population from poverty around the globe. Now, this stark difference of the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer has to be arrested. And it is where microfinance comes into the picture. Without the basic availability of a minimum credit, the income gap that we see in the society is bound to widen, is bound to get kind of starker. Uh, I hope some of you have seen this film, The Joker, the Oscar-winning film Joker, which talks about societal chaos, which is basically a commentary on a larger capitalistic setup. The lead actor, I forgot his name, got the Oscar for the best actor that year. But it's not just a film for entertainment. The film speaks about a larger message about a society which kind of caters to a certain kind of social, liberal, capitalistic, consumeristic kind of lifestyle or a certain model of growth. The idea of microfinance targets such systems and ensures that people do not get left out of this developmental curve. If wealth is concentrated in the hands of few people, as we saw, the three richest individuals in United States of America have enough wealth to feed almost 60% of the bottom of their country. Now, if wealth is concentrated in the hands of few people, the development of an entire civilization comes to an halt. That is why today, there is this very famous movement called as Occupy Wall Street movement. It kind of captured the attention of the entire globe, and that's the reason why I am mentioning it. The Occupy Wall Street movement was against the 1% hoarding wealth, which should ideally be divided across the rest of the 99%. Every country has had their own version of the Occupy Wall Street movement. Now, this problem of wealth concentration is a direct result of microfinance and
Probably some technical difficulties.
sorry, was there a
Yeah, we can see you and hear you again.
okay.
Fine.
I think there was a connection issue maybe in between because of which I lost. But yeah, please do feel free to stop me and ask me any question if you want to. I don't want this to be a sermon where I am standing on a pedestal and delivering some words and pearls of wisdom. At any point of time, if you feel there is something that you need to really know, you can feel free to stop me and ask. Now, this idea of microfinance was kind of formally introduced through a successful model called as the Grameen Bank model. The Grameen Bank, the word Grameen Bank is a kind of a South Asian kind of a term for people from rural areas and catering to their kind of requirements. Now, the idea of Grameen Banks started from Bangladesh. There was this person called as Dr. Mohammed Yunus, who got, by the way, later on ended up getting the Nobel Peace Prize for his contribution towards the idea of microfinance. So he started something called as the Grameen Bank. Now, the Grameen Bank was an attempt to implement a model of microfinance to relieve to ensure that the most lowest denominator in the society also gets access to some sort of social security, some sort of financial credit, some sort of income generating kind of activity. And the idea of microfinance in Bangladesh was extremely successful. Large number of people kind of got benefited from the same, and therefore, of course, he got the Nobel Peace Prize a few years later. But in the core idea of microfinance being utilized successfully to uplift and empower people is a model that stands at the core of the entire microfinance revolution around the globe. Just to give you a brief idea about what the microfinance model stands for or what it was, basically, it was an extension of the existing microfinance system, but was majorly meant for the poor people, was meant for the people who are excluded from the conventional banking infrastructure. So if you are somebody who has a collateral and has security to offer, then the conventional banking system is there for you. But if you do not have it, the Grameen Bank was there for such people. And slowly and steadily, they ended up having more than 8.35 million clients, successful clients who got income generating revenue, and they successfully converted that into certain enterprises. However, the most surprising thing about this banking infrastructure was that more than 80 to 90% of people were women, or the borrowers were women. So it was a women targeted kind of banking model using microfinance, something that had never been implemented anywhere in the world till then. Even more surprising is the fact that over 97% of the loans that were disbursed by the Grameen Bank were returned back to them without any kind of default, or without any kind of any bankruptcy being announced by someone. So a banking model which has 97% recovery rate was unheard of at any point of time in the world. Now, on top of that, the Grameen Bank did not start as a charity providing institution. As the name suggests, it's a bank, and banks have kind of interest rates and a lot of other things. So, how did they kind of manage to give loans to so many people and ensure that every single one of them returns the loan back? Something that even the conventional banking system has never been able to achieve. So, this miracle of microfinance that was launched in Bangladesh by Muhammad Yunus, to an extent that almost a million people who were lenders of the Grameen Bank loans were beggars. Beggars are people who ask for alms on the road, on the street, who are, who do not have any food, clothing, who have like problems with shelter, who, suffer from the lack of the most basic resources for human survival. The Grameen Bank gave loans to such people and ensured that those people start income generating activities and pulled them out of system induced poverty. So this tried and tested successful model of Grameen Bank, it's something that is at the core of this revolution of microfinance. And again, why is it such a miraculous thing to kind of talk about? Because you look at the conventional aid giving agencies around the globe, uh, World Bank or the IMF have kind of disbursed more than 400, 500 billions of dollars over a course of 10 years, 15 years since the Grameen Bank started. But the kind of returns that they were expecting, especially from the third world countries, have not really been the same. I'm kind of talking in a very kind of a very simple kind of a language, but then the point that is that is very important here to understand is that the World Bank and the IMF for decades together have engaged in these structural adjustment programs in the so-called third world countries, the developing countries, the underdeveloped countries, and using these financial distribution of loans, they expected these countries to develop and grow and progress. But the results have been extremely mixed. They have not really been successful. Compared to that, the Grameen Bank has been kind of a runaway hit in any country where it has been actually introduced subsequent to that successful model being shown by Muhammad Yunus. To an extent that at this point of time, almost 100 countries have Grameen-like institutions with over 7,000 banks collaborating with their and ensuring, and the number of people they must have kind of touched and influenced must be in millions and millions of, the numbers would be staggering. But the fact that a banking institution using the idea of microfinance has single-handedly pulled millions of people out of this poverty trap or this debt trap that we have is something that is worth studying and worth kind of analyzing. And that is basically at the core of my PhD research as well. And through my doctoral studies, what I'm trying to do is see how the Grameen Bank model, which was so successful in the context of Bangladesh and some countries, did not work in some. So what went wrong in some countries because of which such a tried and tested successful model did not work? The Grameen Bank in Bangladesh helped in eradicating the relevance of money lenders or loan sharks, as some of the people in the West kind of know, or middlemen per se, who operate as the kind of catalyst between the government and the people in terms of credit disbursement. And the Grameen Bank ensured that they get eliminated, and it was the banking infrastructure and people who are directly in kind of collaboration with each other. So such kind of such success stories need to kind of be replicated and need to kind of be told to a large intersection of people, and that is the core of the microfinance revolution that I'm kind of studying. Of course, India is a case study that I have taken again because, as I was referring to, India kind of stands almost like a continent. The sheer number of people and the expanse of the country is it's something that can accommodate more than half of Europe and a lot of countries in it. Like the city that I come from has more population than a lot of European countries put together. So when we are looking at India as a case study, we are looking literally at the implementation of a policy in a mini continent itself. And that is the reason why studying India is enough to kind of look whether a certain thing or a certain policy or a certain intervention is going in the right direction or not. Now, the problems that I have identified in India have strangely been very similar in its impact or in similar throughout the developing world. And that's why at the end of my doctoral thesis, I plan to create a blueprint and a model which will be something that can be given to these developing countries to implement to ensure that they take the best out of the microfinance model and kind of stay away from the things that can maybe kind of problematic for its implementation. And the common themes that I have seen across these countries where the Grameen model was implemented but was not successful, it's something that is going to be at the core of my study today or my talk today. So I hope I'm kind of making sense. I hope I've created some sort of foundational understanding of what I aspire to do. To just summarize it for people who may have joined later or who may have just been zoned out or disconnected, I'm talking about the idea of income inequality, which is a societal reality. That's why you see Europe as a continent is suffering or is facing one of its highest inflation and the inflation related problems today. I was in France and in Paris, there was a 2 day strike by trade unions and workers and the common people who are working against the rising inflation. Now, why is this inflation affecting people so much? It's because the society is getting increasingly divided. The income inequality problem is right in our face. So we have identified poverty, income inequality as a major problem. We have a solution in the Grameen Bank model. We have a solution in the Muhammad Yunus's tried and tested successful model. What we have to do is we have to ensure that this model gets implemented in those countries where income inequality is getting wider and wider. India is again a country which is a classic for such contrasts. India as a country has some of the richest individuals in the world today. I think the number of billionaires that we have is one of the highest in Asia. Our I think the second or the third richest person in the world again comes from India. So we do have a fair share of people who own a huge amount of wealth. But at the same time, I'm sure a lot of you know that India also has a poverty problem. We have large number of people who sleep hungry every day, who do not get adequate resources to take care of their basic requirements. So India is a country of these contrasts. On one end, we have the super rich, and on the other hand, we have the super poor who face malnutrition and who cannot sustain their families, and people who sleep hungry. Now, to bridge this gap, to ensure that we are not targeting any one particular, because conventionally the solutions to this, if you ask a left wing or a leftist or a left ideology believing person, or a Marxist, the solution would be a revolution. The solution would be a pull down of the capitalist infrastructure. The solution would be equitable redistribution. But there is no middle ground in that. There is no middle ground that we actually have. So the microfinance model offers a middle ground between liberal capitalism and the extreme communistic Marxist understanding of how a state should be actually run. So it takes the best out of the the liberal capitalistic infrastructure, and it also takes some sort of inspiration from the communist equitable redistribution, where the state is at its core, and kind of merges them together into an effective lending model of disbursement. Today, we see India has a rising GDP. The GDP, basically, for people who may understand, is basically just a marker of how prosperous your country is, how much national income actually you have. But clearly, it is not the only marker of a kind of a region's prosperity or growth, or it's the real marker towards the situation of the country. So the microfinance model tries to go deeper and understand that why in a country like India we have some of the richest individuals in the world. India sells the one of the largest numbers of BMWs and the you know, the these high end fancy vehicles. But at the same time, we have people who are not getting adequate education, healthcare, and who have to go tens of kilometers for the most basic resources. So the microfinance model tries to bridge them, ensure there is empowerment, ensure there is equitable distribution of wealth and of these resources that a country has. And that's the reason why this topic becomes extremely relevant. So this is not a theoretical study of something that has happened, but it's a practical kind of a guidebook for something that probably is happening today and will be relevant tomorrow as well. So if we do not want, going back to the Joker example, if we do not want a situation like Joker, where a civilization moves into chaos, and people just kind of or like in the movie as well, if you see the family of Batman is blamed for a lot of things that are wrong in the city, in a fictional city, but it can very easily be a reality for us. It's just a matter of time when the economic chaos can spiral into, because eventually when people have nothing to lose, when hunger is at stake, the reactions can be extremely violent. So we do not want that extreme reactions in any country. Today, we have a problem of the energy crisis across Europe. We have rising inflation, unemployment, post-COVID job losses. We heard of Amazon the other day laying off thousands of its employees. So there is going to be an economic uncertainty. The business cycle or the economic recession and depression is going to definitely affect a lot of countries. Now, the microfinance model ensures some sort of shock absorbing mechanisms to such economic impacts. It ensures that people could sustain themselves amidst such economic chaos, such crisis that is happening around the world. And it's something that, uh, again, I mean, look at UK as a country has gone and had multiple prime ministers in a short span of time. One of the biggest reasons is the economic crisis the country probably foresees in a post-Brexit world. So one of the biggest solutions that some of these countries are looking at is to look at microfinance as a more viable alternative to the conventional disbursement mechanisms, which may not have actually worked. That's the reason why, if you see the last recession that happened in 2008, the crash that we had, the busting of the housing bubble, all the shocks that the economy takes decades to recover from can be absorbed by an economy where microfinance plays a very crucial role, because it stabilizes the grassroots. It ensures that the MSME sector, the medium and small and medium enterprise sector remains stable in a situation like COVID, where a lot of industries shut down. People had health emergencies. There were massive lockdowns that were implemented across the globe. In such an instance, it is microfinance that can sustain people, because it will ensure that people have the cushion of some amount of savings or some amount of income that they have generated through their local industries without the active intervention of the state, because the state cannot actually reach everywhere. It is microfinance that can sustain them. And that is kind of the reason why I'm like a promoter of the Grameen model of microfinance at the core of every economic activity. Now, there are certain pitfalls. Like, for example, in Bangladesh, they have started something called as the group lending model. What is the group lending model? The group lending model basically means that they will not give loan to only any one individual. So there will be five people who may need loans. So the five people will make a group of theirs, will approach the Grameen Bank, and will be given a loan collectively. And the disbursal of the loan and the recovery of the loan will not be only an individual's prerogative. The rest of the five people will also be equally responsible for the loan being repaid or given back. That creates a community solidarity that ensures that people work towards an idea collectively. They ensure that they are there for each other. They ensure that community as a whole develops and does not, I mean, United States of America usually professes the pursuit of happiness as a core fundamentals of its constitution. I mean, it's there in one of their constitutional principles. But the idea of pursuit of knowledge kind of somehow hints at an individualistic growth. That's why we celebrate these rags to riches stories. We celebrate these people who have become kind of celebrated and successful. But then those exceptions aside, a huge chunk of population does not achieve that kind of progress. The microfinance model, through its group lending systems, ensures that communities together can grow and can become rich, can become self-sustaining, can become utilizers of collective common good and common wealth. And that is at the core of the Grameen model. So they are not aspiring to ensure that one person takes the loan and becomes rich and kind of goes out of uh, the what is that escape velocity of poverty, but ensures that an entire group gets certain kind of loan, and villages and communities can come together and can become self-sufficient and self-sustaining. So this model of microfinance is something that has to be looked at, and is being looked at not just in developing countries, but in developed countries as well. As I was referring to before the lecture started, even a country like Germany is extensively researching into this particular program. Spain, as a country, especially after um, the entire the economic crisis that happened after the Greek controversy. I'm sure everybody knows about it. The Portugal, Ireland, Greece crisis are again looking at microfinance to sustain such shocks down the line. They are looking at ensuring equitable distribution and collective growth for ensuring that something drastic like that does not happen. Spain at one point of time was going through almost 50 to 60% of unemployment. I remember the precarious situations where half the population was uncertain about how the country is going to go through. Of course, being a part of a larger economic political group helps sustain such shocks. But if tomorrow an entire continent goes through it, then it's going to be very difficult to sustain that unity. And that is the reason why the idea of microfinance as an economic model, it's not a political model, it's an economic model that can be looked at to ensure unity, equal distribution, and collective growth. And that's what I'm kind of studying over here. However, of course, there are some reasons because of which it has not worked in several developing countries. And if you kind of address those concerns, the idea of microfinance can be your magic tool in alleviating poverty and ensuring there is kind of relatively lesser inequality. Uh, the problem is that different geographical regions require credit for different purposes. So, understanding the requirements of the global north and global south is something very important, as what happened in India. In India, when the same Grameen model was introduced, it was successful in some pockets, but it was extremely unsuccessful in some others. So, what happened that in the same country was the same policy successful and unsuccessful? And that's when you realize that the requirements of credit in different parts of a country may be very different. Like, for example, as I was in Sicily the other day, and the requirements of Sicily, uh, although being very much a part of Italy, are very different from that of the people, let's say, staying in Rome, which might be hundreds of kilometers away. So the requirements of credit for people staying in Rome or around Rome are very different from that of the people who are staying on the slopes of Mount Etna, or whose agricultural requirements might be very different, or whose wine processing and wine grapes and wine processing industries might require a different kind of help. So these tailor-made policies can be targeted through the microfinance model. Like, for example, even if you look at, I was in this country, Bulgaria, a few months back, and again, I was talking to a lot of people related to the microfinance model, and one of the biggest criticisms or concerns that they have is that a lot of people sitting in Berlin, in Germany, or people who are part of the European Parliament fail to understand the economic requirements of people in Sofia. Sofia, the capital of now, they have a currency difference. If you may know that Bulgaria has a different currency. And they don't have the euro. They have something called as the Bulgarian lev, and Bulgarian lev is literally 1:2 to the euro. So in €1 you get like twice the amount of money there. Just being very now, so in such a context, their economic requirements are very different. So they cannot undertake the same policies that European Union wants the rest of the countries to implement. So understanding the require or credit requirements in different contexts is very important. And if a country identifies that, the idea of microfinance can be very easily kind of implemented. Secondly, the political intervention into a financial model like microfinance should be as minimal as possible. There is this difference between uh, uh, distribution and regulation. So at this point of time, a lot of countries, especially in the developing part of the world, focus majorly on the distribution part, and because they are the distributors, they also kind of de facto become the regulators. Now, in the case of microfinance, the governments or the socialistic or the, the presidents and the prime ministers and the finance ministries may not have the adequate requisite information of the grassroots. And therefore, the idea of Grameen, even in democratic countries, should be ideally kept relatively away from the conventional banking infrastructure. Like in Bangladesh, when they introduced the Grameen model, they ensured that the politicians or the ministers do not utilize the banking infrastructure for their own political needs. Like even in developed countries today, the idea of finance is majorly used for uh, political reasons, whether it is packages or whether it is announcements for a certain sector, whether it is healthcare benefits, whether it is so the idea of finances, may of course with economic prudence, has a lot of political kind of some sort of a backing to it or some political foundation to it. Now, the idea of microfinance does not need such political interventions, especially in the context of India and several other South Asian countries, or even in Latin America, where microfinance was implemented using the existing communist governments there. The state kind of got overtly involved in a political sense, and that was kind of not conducive for the essential implementation of microfinance. So keeping politics away is very important. Even the agricultural sector, European Union again is facing a huge agricultural crisis. People in the urban centers don't really study about it, but there is something called as a central agricultural policy that the EU comes up with. And now they have revised it with CAP 2.0, which is extremely controversial. Now, this CAP has a very integral role for microfinance at its very core. Um, and they try to internalize and integrate several things. But then the problem is this CAP does not understand the various cropping patterns, the occupational choices, the cultural differences that might exist from various state to state. And the ramifications for the same are severe. Today, European Union, and again, the reason why I am referring more to the EU is because it can be relatable to a lot of people listening over here. The EU currently is going through a huge right-wing shift. I'm sure you know about a right-wing leader coming to power in Italy, a right-wing leader in several countries. Even Marine Le Pen, a very prominent contender in France, uh, uh, who kind of came very close to kind of winning elections over there. Even in Germany, we have the fringe right wing, the extreme right wing becoming relevant. Sweden has a very powerful right wing political party. Now, where do they derive their political support from? These right wing parties derive their support from this rural fringe, which is kept away from the benefits of these economic policies. That is where the idea of microfinance comes into the picture, which ensures that the unique requirements of the grassroots of the agriculturist is taken care of. So this conventional banking infrastructure that we rely upon so much may not necessarily be may not necessarily be the may not necessarily be reaching to the right people. This is the same crisis that we saw in ASEAN. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations uh, went through a similar kind of problem. Venture capitalists, profit eyeing banking institutions usually misuse these microfinancing and financial institutions for their own gains. And that is the reason why it's important to keep it away from a larger political nexus. Secondly, in a lot of these countries, the interest rates taken by the conventional banking institutions is very steep. And subsequently, they have a very questionable recovery kind of tactics. For people who may not know, in the developing land, in developing countries like India, the banks have dedicated groups of people who ensure that the loans are recovered in various ways, and the recovery tactics are extremely questionable. And this can kind of deter people from approaching a banking system for loans or for short-term credit. Now, the idea of microfinance through Grameen does not does not deal with something like this. It ensures that the bank reaches the people. So as a part of microfinance model, a member of a banking institution will reach to the villages, will go to the lowest denominator, will go to a small county, will go to a small village which may not have more than 400, 300 people, and will ensure that the unique microfinance requirements of that village are taken care of. Today, the problem with the central agricultural policy in EU is also about the fact that the small farmer with a small land holding is going to suffer, while the farmer which has like a large land and which is controlled by the capitalists and rich industrialists are going to benefit from the same. So the idea of rural cohesion is something that is very important here. If you see, even through policy making, healthcare benefits or education is a major crisis in the non-urban sectors of EU as well, where a lot of these countries have a migration coming to the urban centers in hordes. I mean, you look at cities like Amsterdam or Berlin or Paris, important centers of employment generating activities are full. There is an urban crisis that we actually see currently. If you, I mean, I'm sure you have heard of something called as the Paris syndrome. Paris syndrome is where in your head you have a certain vision of what Paris is, but when you actually go to the city, you are disillusioned and you are dissatisfied, and you're you're disappointed with the what you see there. Now, why is that happening? Because the city does not have adequate infrastructural resources to take care of the large number of people who are coming from the various parts of the country to an urban center. So this is kind of something that the idea of microfinance can address and can tackle, because it ensures that there is a reverse migration. It ensures that people at the rural places retain, like, one of the biggest problems that European Union is facing, and which I was just discussing with a professor a few days back, is about depleting number of students in schools in non-urban centers. So it's a cyclical thing. So what is happening is that people in rural areas are migrating to cities, large cities, urban cities. Because of that, they are not keen in sending their kids to the schools back home. Because of that, the schools in the villages or semi-urban places do not have adequate resources to take care of the depleting number of people. Infrastructure is a major concern, and these schools are shutting down. These schools are non-sustainable. They are not getting enough educators, enough teachers to teach in these schools in the rural areas. So it's a cyclical thing. And because there are no teachers, there is not enough infrastructure. People are then again forced to migrate to cities, big cities, large cities. And because of that, inflation becomes a problem. Because if you move to a city like Berlin, Berlin might be an amazing city, but the accommodation and the food uh, prices over here are off the roof. And then you have to deal with all the other economic downfalls of the same. So to arrest this thing from spiraling out of control, microfinance helps people sustain themselves back in the villages. It ensures that these same people who are choosing to come from the rural parts of a country go back to their country, and go back to their city, go back to their village, go back to their urban center, to their town. France government in the last 1 year, I forgot the name of the policy, has introduced and has pumped in millions of dollars, millions of euros, and ensuring that these small villages remain sustainable, or they kind of ensure that there is enough infrastructural development in these villages that people do not feel like leaving them. Microfinance helps them. In COVID, one of the biggest problems that a lot of continents faced is of lack of information dissemination. Internet connectivity beyond the major centers is a major problem. You broadband connectivity that you all kind of know is the backbone of telecommunication and information dissemination, does not exist beyond a certain point. You go to the rural centers or rural cities, rural places across your continent, you will realize that internet broadband has not reached those places. Now, how will those people progress? How will those people develop? Microfinance ensures that these people get those kind of requisite kind of basic amenities for their growth and development. So the benefits are kind of I hope I have time with me, but this is what makes the idea of microfinance more reasonable and more acceptable per se. There is the commercial banking institutions can falter, and you have seen that in the recent past where a very prominent banking institution may be successful today, but 5 years later, 10 years later, because of certain uh, decisions that they might have taken which may not be economically prudent, files for bankruptcy, or is under a lot of stress, and the government of that country has to bail them out by bailout packages. I'm sure bailout packages is a very popular term here. Now, the microfinance model is very self-sustainable that way. It does not it does it ensures that there is no the banks do not need any external support to take care of them. The members, the lenders, the borrowers work together as a family in ensuring that the credit gets disbursed across the spectrum. So this is what makes the idea of microfinance again very conducive person. Also, uh, the definition of microcredit in most third world countries and even in first world countries is not understood properly. In the Grameen model or in the conventional idea of microfinance that we have, the idea of giving small loans to people is misunderstood. Giving small loans to buy consumer goods like television, refrigerators, or basically loan waivers is not microcredit. Microcredit is basically a political or an economic interference in ensuring that people have income generation activities. And that is why every country today has started these make in Germany. There is a term called as I forgot, it's a German term, but it basically stands for make in Germany, which basically means Germans should come together, huge German infrastructure, German knowledge, German technical know-how, and produce goods and services which will be consumed by Germans. And it's a very self-sustaining kind of a model that they are actually promoting. Similarly, Spain is doing the same. Italy is doing the same. So a lot of countries around the globe are ensuring that the local resources are pooled for their own growth. This is not inward looking. I mean, one should not misunderstand this as an inward looking domestic uh, policies which shun external interference. No, this is about encouraging local producers. It is about encouraging people who would want to come together for the development of their own land. And microfinance gives them that particular platform. And that's the reason the idea of microfinance is very lucrative today, even for developed countries. It leads to an increased, socio-political awareness. It's not just about few communities or groups coming together, but it is about a development of an entire sector. It's about development of like for example, jute producing, cotton producing industries, sugar cane producing industries, which are extremely lucrative agriculturally, are targeted by these microfinance models to ensure that they become self-sustaining cooperatives in India and in third world countries per se. Women empowerment is a major concern. For people who may not know, women in a lot of these uh, underdeveloped or developing countries per se do not enjoy the same kind of freedom, do not enjoy the same kind of privilege or progress development like men. It's a The whole patriarchal setup is very much ingrained in our psyche. Now, women need a platform. Women need some sort of an outlet for their creativity, for their potential. But the existing social arrangements do not encourage that. The ideas and the waves of feminism might have reached across the globe. But in India and in a lot of countries, women are still majorly treated as inferior or secondary citizens. And that's a major concern. We are not very proud about it. There are various policy interventions for women empowerment to ensure that women and men get equal opportunities. But the system and patriarchal mindset ensures that women are restricted to a certain point. There is this thing called as glass ceiling. Women usually, to achieve something extraordinary, have to always break through the glass ceiling of patriarchy. In India, it's doubly hard. And microfinance then provides a ready-made platform for women, especially in the hinterland, in the countryside, in the villages, to ensure that they compete on on an equal platform with their counterparts from the urban centers. And that is why microfinance becomes very interesting. As mentioned earlier, um, the Grameen model in Bangladesh had almost 87% of women lenders, women borrowers. Now, that ensured that women had credit and money to start something on their own, to start some entrepreneurial activities on their own, an opportunity which the conventional system would have been unable to provide. Hijab controversy in Iran and the fight that women are the resistance from women against against the patriarchal system is very interesting.
Unfortunately, dear ladies and gentlemen, some technical issues. Hopefully, we're going to be able to overcome them. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I think internet gave up midway. But yeah, uh, I've already spoken for almost an hour now. Um, So I would like to just pause here for a brief, and I hope I am being kind of clear to people. See, the thing on women empowerment may not make a lot of sense to people in the global West. And I realize that because women are more or less have kind of reached a certain level of societal equity in the global North. But in the global South, especially in India and underdeveloped countries, women are not given the same equal opportunities as men. Patriarchy, Simone de Beauvoir, the famous feminist writer who wrote The Second Sex, she said that women are not born but are created. It very much holds true for a country like India or the South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, where institutionalized mechanisms, religion plays a much more important role in suppressing the rights of women. Now, in such an instance, microfinance plays an important role in providing them an institutionalized platform for growth. Women otherwise would never be allowed, quote unquote, by men of their family to progress, grow, and do something on their own. But the microfinance model ensures that it is women who are targeted first up. So if they want to give a loan or if they want to disburse some amount of funds, they ensure that women of the household are targeted first up. They are kind of given an opportunity to utilize the money first up. So it's not the man, it's not the so-called head of the family, it's not the breadwinner of the family which is at the top of the food chain here, but it is women. And especially when we are talking about a world where the fourth wave of feminism and the fifth wave of feminism is coming up, I think the microfinance model provides a very important opportunity for ensuring these subaltern, underrepresented women get equal kind of opportunities. To again then summarize this entire conversation that we are again having, the idea of microfinance, to just kind of summarize that in few lines, is directly targeted to ensure that the great inequality that we have around the globe gets bridged. And this is not just about global South, global North, but even within the global South, what we actually have. This tag of being third world countries is something that is kind of uh, which made sense 5 decades, 4 decades ago. But in the 21st century, when we have globalization reaching at our doorstep, it is not such a good thing to be referred to as a third world. So I think microfinance agencies do have the potential to empower countries in a much more stronger manner. And the United Nations, a lot of these agencies through the Millennium Development Goals and a lot of other things have targeted more such issues previously, but they do not have a concrete blueprint. The microfinance model will ensure that all the Millennium Development Goals, the SDG goals, get fulfilled if you implement it in the similar way. So whether it is gender related concerns, whether it is other problems for which conventionally there is only lip service, there is only conversation about it, will be seen in action through microfinance. So it becomes a ray of hope, for existing banking infrastructure. Uh, Also, around the globe, we have this problem of non-performing assets, the NPAs. The third world countries do suffer from a lot of NPAs. The microfinance model does not have any scope of the non-performance asset, and that's, I think, it's that is at its core of its success around the globe. So these risk management techniques that they develop is very unique to the microfinance Grameen model, and therefore should be taken very seriously. So the idea of bad debts, NPAs, are definitely targeted. So the microfinance model works as a tool for socio-economic upliftment of a large section of the population, and changes their quality of life, changes a certain kind of social consciousness. When I talk over here, there is this term called as demographic dividend, which is majorly used in sociological studies. Demographic dividend basically means the population of any country in the age group of 16 to 60. This is the population that is the, what should we say, works for the country or contributes effectively to the economic development of the country. Uh, because anybody who's below 15 years of age or 14 years of age, and anybody who's above 60, 65 years of age is a dependent population. So they need somebody to take care of them. They need pension schemes, they need social security schemes. The people in the age group of 16 to 60 are the ones who are sustaining the economy. Now, for these people, microfinance plays an important catalyst in ensuring that their potential gets utilized more effectively. So, I would like to stop here, and I hope I have not bored you with such exotic topics, but I kind of develops this curiosity amongst the students to read more about it and modify these models for your own country. It's like it's like crypto, cryptocurrency, or things which sounded very exotic 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Maybe if you ask any layman, they may not have an idea. But in today's times, such banking models or such experiments are definitely welcome. So similarly, I think microfinance has its, the time has come for it to be taken more seriously. So thank you.
Thank you warmly for this insightful and very interesting speech. Of course, we are here a couple of legal specialists and legal students who also have a look at the topics which we deal with from from various points of view. Of course, the legal point of view is of the utmost importance for us. But of course, you've mentioned quite a plethora, I'd rather say, of interesting insights to the topic of microfinance. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to open the discussion. I do have some questions, but I would not like to be the first one to to ask. Therefore, I'd like to ask you warmly if there are any questions from your part. Yes. Yes, please.
Hello. I was wondering, and I didn't understand if there's a solution to this, but if a small holder or a small farmer gets a micro loan, and if for some reason it has a bad crop, what happens then? Because it's supposed to empower them, but it might become a torment. So what could we do since it's supposed to be self-sustainable, these institutions, so the government couldn't, I mean, I'm not sure if it could or not, but for what I understood, it can intervene. So how would that work?
That's a very interesting question. So I'll tell you how it is, because of course it has happened before that when a loan is given and if there is a bad crop, that is, I guess, her question, where if a small loan is given to a farmer and there is a bad crop or there is a bad monsoon or there is something else that happens, then how does that farmer recover that money? Now, under microfinance, what they do is that they do not give money for only agricultural needs. So they will, just like how the World Bank does. When a World Bank gives money to a country, they do not just disburse loans. They have a certain checklist that a country needs to fulfill. That's why it's not called as a loan, but it is called as a structural adjustment program. So whenever a World Bank or IMF offers credit line to a certain country, in return, they also ensure fulfillment of certain things that they want the country to fulfill, whether it is opening up the economy for foreign capital, or restructuring their banking model in a certain way, or it can be multiple other things. Similarly, what microfinance does is, like, for example, if farmer A is or wants a certain loan, then the microfinance agency will analyze and study the kind of crops the farmer can take, and will also tell that person in a very educated manner the disbursement of the loan, uh, or the kind of use or the utility of that loan across a diverse spectrum. Just like how mutual funds work, like when you put money into a mutual fund, the mutual fund manager will put the money in 10 different portfolios, ensuring that tomorrow, if any one of them does not perform, the rest of the nine may kind of cover up for that. Similarly, a farmer will not just be given money to conduct his own agriculture. He will also be encouraged to buy cattle. to buy cows, or to buy some other sustainable income generation activities, which will short give that person some money. So the money will not be given just like conventional banking for things that a person wants, but also for things which the bank feels the person can actually invest and implement and sustainably work. Also, because microfinance works in a group lending model, the loan is not necessarily given to one person directly. It is given to a group, and the compliance of the fulfillment of the needs is has to be ensured by the other people in the group for to be eligible for bigger and better loans down the line. So it's about, if there are four people here and all four of them want loan, then one person will be given loans, the other three will ensure that the first person's loan gets utilized effectively and he starts an income generation activity. Based on that successful model, the second person in the group will get an even bigger loan, and the third person an even bigger one, and so on and so forth. So a chain and a hierarchical distribution will be created, will be monitored effectively, and ensured that this loan does not, or the person does not suffer losses. So it's a model that has been tried and tested, and works for equitable distribution across income generation activities. So it's not just a blind faith in a person and a loan is being disbursed. That happens in conventional banks. That's why we have non-performing assets. That's why we have bad debts. That's why we have billionaires uh, filing for bankruptcy when things don't go their way. That does not happen in microfinance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank,
welcome.
thank you. Further questions from your part?
See it. Just to give you an example, uh, in India, the pickle producing industry is very popular. Have you heard of this thing, pickles? Like, it's a firm. I'm sure people do eat pickles here. Uh, Now, pickles are not a huge industry. Like, it does not require a multi-million-dollar investment, nor is it a very small industry as well, which can just be started by two people in a garage. Now, it requires about 5 to 10 people, and it requires some amount of basic investment. Now, in the rural areas of our country, in India especially, women may not have the agency or the background or the capital. So if they come together, 10 women come together and approach a bank, the bank may give them a million, or maybe just under something like that, and they will monitor its implementation. So the turnover may not be huge, but then for somebody who does not have anything, even a certain amount of money that they earn may be something that can be substantial for their growth. So the idea is not to make Warren Buffets overnight. The idea of microfinance is not to ensure that people in one lifetime become Bill Gates. No, the idea is that we ensure that you create some supplementary income for the family, ensure that there is some amount of basic credit that you generate, some surplus that you generate. Like, if you have something for 50 euros, you sell it for 70, you get 20 euros of profit. So 20 euros might not be a huge thing, but that 20 euros is substantial for somebody who has 0 euros. So that's the model. And from those 20 they can make 40, 50, and in one lifetime they can achieve some amount of financial clout. But the idea is not to give millions of dollars to ensure we create the next Bill Gates or the next Jeff Bezos. It can happen, but that's not the point.
Thank you also for that clarification. Are there any further questions from your part before I have a question? Seems not to be the case.
Seems I have been so amazing that people have understood everything that and they have no further questions.
Well, I do have one. For
Yeah.
instance, you've mentioned the paradigm, the example of France, and a certain policy which was used some years before in terms of emphasizing needs of rural areas there.
Yeah.
And since that was grosso modo under the the structure of state aid, or to be seen as a sort of state aid.
Correct.
Generally, the European Union law sees matters of state aid quite negatively in terms of that they could be potentially harmful for the well functioning of the internal market. So having that
Yeah.
in mind, so Article 107 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union is initially quite negative on matters of state aid. And having that in mind,
Yeah.
do you think that the structure of microfinance could survive in a structure like the one of the internal market of the European Union, which very much is based on quite certain rules of competition law? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe it can. And I mean, if you study this particular thing called as the Recovery and Resilience Facility, RRF, which was introduced, and even there is something called as there are these recommendations of this Conference on the Future of Europe, COFE. And there is something else. I just I'm just not able to recollect it right now. It was called as the React program. React, it came up in the post-COVID. I think it was called as the I forgot. It's called as React, REACT, and it has a full form. I'll just kind of tell you what it stands for completely. It's called as EU Recovery Assistance for Cohesion and the Territories of Europe. Now, under that, the idea of microfinance does find its place. So the fact is that they have realized that this is a sustainable model and can be implemented. There will be pilot operations launched in the next few years to see if it can sustain, the internal the economic various European countries actually have. But it does have a future. I truly believe that it does have a future, and especially in a post pandemic world. Uh, I'm just froze. Uh, I'll just. Am I audible?
Yes, right now you are.
Okay. Okay. So I was referring to the React program. Did you hear me till then, or was I not audible then?
For the biggest part, yes.
So I was talking about the React program, the program that is launched, the Recovery Assistance for Cohesion and the Territories of EU. So that particular program does have a clear emphasis on microfinance as a sustainable model, which they have kind of accommodated into. Even the resilience facility that I told you about, or there is something else. I just happen to forget what it was called, but there is even the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, has recommended something on these lines to be implemented in some countries where there is financial and agricultural stress. So EU has implemented it. They may not be calling it microfinance. They may not call it the Grameen Bank model. They might have their own name to it. But more or less, I think the idea will definitely take up. There was something else. I'll just tell you about it. It was called as uh, I was reading about it the other day under the OECD, or just forgot. But anyway, so it's a mm, anyways. So it's again, there are these multiple ways. Like for example, there was this policy that was launched by the EU to connect um, broadband to the across the continent. And that how they realize that this is yeah, even this something, this European Agricultural Fund for Rural Development, EAFRD, and the connecting, yeah, I was talking about a connecting Europe facility, CEF. Again, they emphasize something on these lines. So internally within the EU, it is definitely a sustainable model, and they are very much interested in it. at this point of time, European Union or European Parliament per se may be very distracted by the whole Ukrainian crisis, but the entire rebuilding process post COVID will definitely include microfinance in a much more stronger way. A lot of the resolutions that have been passed lately have hinted towards the same. So I'm very optimistic about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, dear ladies and gentlemen, any further questions to our dear Professor Naikade here?
It's pretty late in the night, I guess.
It's not that late. It's fine. For us here, it's not that late. So, well, if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you once more, warmly, for your insightful and interesting lecture regarding a topic which is not dealt with too much right here. And as you depicted, it plays a significant role, and its significance is increasing over the last years.
In Europe, they have something, or like around the globe, they have something called as the gig economy. People do talk about the gig economy. Gig economy is basically freelancers or people who may not be protected by institutional apparatus. They are not a part of the formal sector economy. Now, the microfinance model protects these gig workers because they are the ones who are vulnerable. Like tomorrow, if there is a coronavirus, or God forbid, it should not happen, but there is going to be a major economic fallout. No, and people will be on the streets. So who's going to, I mean, unemployment allowances is one thing, but can that be a sustainable model for a long time? I'm not sure. So yeah, I mean, yeah, anyway, sorry, I kind of, you are in your middle of your, yeah.
No, it's fine. So thank you warmly once more for these insights. And we'd like to wish you all the very best, of course. And dear ladies and gentlemen, as we normally say, please stay tuned to the further upcoming also lectures of our series. As a conclusion, as always, I'd like to thank my dear colleague Andrea warmly for providing the space, the virtual room of this lecture series. And I'd like to wish you all the very best. Have a nice evening. Have a nice day. See you.
Thank you.